you're really enthused to learn it, and then all of a sudden you hit a brick wall with it, and all of a sudden you think, actually, maybe this isn't the language for me. This tends to happen maybe a few months into learning the language, but it can hit you at any point really. You suddenly hit a sort of brick wall, what you call like a learning plateau, where you're no longer, when you start learning a language, you're like, oh, this is the language for me, how exciting, so much more interesting than, any other language that I've learned before, if you've learned previous languages. Or you think, if it's the first language you learn, you think, oh wow, this is going to be a big part of my identity. And then that excitement starts fading away a bit, and you start thinking, actually, this is, maybe you start getting interested in another language, and the exciting bit about learning the first language dies away a little bit. You get used to you get used to the novelty of it. And that's really annoying when that happens. And there are two things people tend to do in this situation. The first is they'll drop the language, the first language they're studying, and learn the other language. Or the other thing they'll try to do is learn two languages at the same time. So that could be one instance when you want to learn in two languages at the same time. Another instance is maybe you want to learn you're interested in a certain culture, a certain time period, a certain geographical area perhaps, and within that geographical area, or even country in some cases, there's more than one language that you want to learn. So let's say your classic example, I know, but let's say you want to learn, you're very interested in the far East Asia, so China, Japan, Korea. You watch Squid Games and all of a sudden you want to learn Korean. Oh, but you're also very interested in anime, so you want to learn Japanese at the same time, and you find Chinese very interesting. You think China's going to take over the world, so you want to learn Chinese. Maybe you're interested in the Middle East. You like the Arabic scripts, the Arabic abjad, but you want to learn Arabic, so you want to read the Quran. But then at the same time, you want to learn Persian. You want to learn Turkish. Maybe you're very interested in. India, the languages of India. And yeah, you just can't. There's no language that springs out of you that where you want to compromise. Where you want to just pick one language, and you feel like you're interested in a language group as a collective. So that's another instance where you might want to learn two languages at the same time. So, put all that aside. Let's say you want to learn two languages at the same time. How good of an idea is that? Just first do that, and then that's the decision you have to make. And then I think the second thing we'll talk about is, if you are going to do it, regardless of how effective it is, how would you make it as effective as possible? So, first thing to do is, first question to ask is, Yeah, the first question to ask is, so how effective is it learning two languages at the same time? You get a lot of different things if you ask different people. So, Steve Kaufman is a good example of someone who's typically studied just one language at the same time. And he says, you know, you can only fall in love with one person at a time, usually. And same with languages, you know, you just get engrossed in one culture. But there have been a few times when he's delved into two languages. Luca Lampariello. I don't know if he's still doing it, but when I last checked out his channel, I think he was learning 3 languages at the same time. And you get a lot of people who do this kind of stuff. So as clear as possible. How effective is it? Well, I think LangFocus makes a very good point in that you might say, so let's say you want to learn French and Spanish at the same time. Spend 1 hour studying French and 1 hour studying Spanish per day. Is that as effective as studying French for 1 hour a day? Will your French be as good as if you just study it in isolation, or would it be equal? And what Paul says in LangFocus is no, it wouldn't. Your French would be better if you studied it for 1 hour a day in isolation. And the reason for that is because the real learning you do is not so much when you're sitting there reading it, doing your learning, but you go into your brain. And if you have two languages, if you're studying 2 languages at the same time, then your brain is working out both those languages simultaneously. So that's something to think about. So I think the other thing I think to consider is a lot of these people who will tell you to study 2 languages will often be people who have not studied, who have studied several languages in the past. So I think if it's your first time learning a language, that's another difficulty to assess. I think it's a lot harder to learn 2 languages at once if you're not familiar with the process of learning one language. So those are some of the disadvantages. I think it really does stifle. The other thing is, I think the temptation to learn a language, to learn 2 languages, is slightly born out of a desire to just keep that novelty of a language. But the problem is that I think to make progress in a language and to make progress in any skill really, it only really happens when it stops becoming novel. It stops becoming exciting. Just becomes something you're very familiar with. That's the only time you really get improvement. And you can kind of say, oh, you know, I'm so bored of learning. I'm so bored of learning French. Oh, I just wish, you know, it's such a boring language. In a way, if you're feeling that about the language you're learning, that's good. That means you're making progress. You're making progress in the language. it means you're making progress. You know, like, I mean, to give you an example, I'm studying Latin at the moment, and I can't tell you how fucking sick I am of this language. I'm just fucking dumb. I find it so boring and so just any beauty I once saw in the language, I just now think it's begun to become as familiar as as English in a way, not quite, but it's getting on that way, and it'll become even more so if I studied it more. If I read a sign in English, like Piccadilly Gardens over there, I don't look at it and go, oh wow, it's so beautiful and it sounds so interesting, and wow, what a cool way to spell, what a cool use of a alphabet. No, I don't think any of that, but I can read it. So I would say don't be tempted, don't be too enticed by novelty, because novelty goes very quickly, and if you're enjoying, to be honest, if you find it too if you're one of those people who finds you keep switching around with languages and never really commits to one thing, which to some extent I've done myself, then that's probably that part of the problem. Is you need to just settle down for one language that you're going to be very sick of, but you'll be very good at it. I mean, take my own example. I am really very good at reading Latin now. I mean, for a dead language, it's really hard. It's a really hard language, but I've made an awful lot of progress, and I wouldn't have made that if it was all interesting to me now. There's a part of me that's just dying to learn Sanskrit. I just want to learn Sanskrit so bad. I think it's so cool. And there's a part of me that just wants to say my Latin's good enough and start learning ancient Greek again. But I know that's the wrong decision, because I'm just not at a level with my Latin that it would be worth it. Because what's going to happen, I'm going to start learning Sanskrit. Nice little letters. Oh, isn't this cool? I'm going to start learning Greek. Oh, isn't it beautiful? Oh, isn't it fun? Isn't it fun? And a month later, I'm going to be like, this language is fucking boring as well. Oh, look at that Latin book I was reading 1 month ago. Why didn't I find that interesting at the time? Too late, and now I've lost a lot of progress. Well, I've lost some of my progress anyway. I've lost a bit of momentum. I've lost a month's worth of progress in Latin. So I'm really trying to resist that. I'm certainly going to just study either Latin or Greek for the remainder of this year when my university course ends. Just because it's practical. And unless I get really sick at Latin, or unless I really need to study Greek much harder for my exams, the Greek exams aren't that hard, because universities don't teach languages very well. But if, let's say I do, then I'll switch to Greek, But apart from that, I really think I've just got to stick to this. Italian as well, part of me really wishes I'm learning Italian instead, because that's, I can speak it, but I really want to be a lot better at it. But I kind of have to say to myself, tough luck, You decide to go for this language at university, just do it, get it over with, be patient, and move on to the next thing. So, yeah. So that's my own personal reflection on it. But what I will say is, I think there is a time and a place for learning two languages at the same time. but I think you have to. I think the advantage of it, if you are going to do it, is that it keeps a little bit of novelty to it, which goes against everything I just said a bit. But there's something nice about the novelty of a language. But I think you have to regulate that novelty, because I think the way to do that is you have to choose one primary language that all your attention is going to go on, most of your attention is going to go on to. And then there's another language you're really interested in that you want to study. Commit maybe, let's say, 1 hour a week to studying that other language. Or, just whenever you get, just really try and, the important thing is really regulate how much you study that language. And you make a bit of progress, you won't make a lot of progress, but you'll make enough, it'll still be a rewarding little pastime, a little side hustle, if you will. And then thirdly, and then the other thing I would say, if you're going to do this, is I would make sure that the second language you learn, the side language, is of a different language family to the one you're studying at the moment, or at least very different. There should be as little similarity as possible. So let's say you want to learn Spanish and Italian, for example. It's really tough. But I think with something like that, where the languages are so similar, you just have to pick one. And I'll do a whole video about how to pick the right language for you, how to make that kind of tough decision, because that's something I thought a lot about myself. I'll leave a little link in the description for that. But I think with something like that, you just go for one. There are two reasons why but let's say you're studying Italian and you're also really interested in Chinese. Fantastic. Spend an hour studying Italian every day, and then an hour every week studying a bit of Chinese. And no, you won't get very good at it, but you'll get a little bit of momentum going in that language. And that will give you a little break from Italian, give your brain a chance to rest and process, and then you can go back to the Italian and be very interested in it again. And this is kind of what I'm doing with Greek and Latin at the moment. More out of necessity than anything else, I'll spend most of my time reading Latin or translating Latin, but then because I do a Greek module in my uni, I'll spend a bit of time translating our set texts as well, or doing a bit of translation elsewhere. And then I'll come back to Latin and it's interesting again. The second reason so that's the first reason. So why do I say this? I think keep the languages different. First, because first it's kind of obvious really. The more similar the languages are, the easier you're going to get stifled. Your progress is going to get stifled. So take the example of Italian and Spanish again. Just learning Spanish, even if it's only a little bit, you're going to be, because they're so similar, the small differences are going to sort of soak into your Italian or your Spanish or vice versa. And okay, maybe it doesn't really matter, but I think it's annoying when that kind of stuff happens, and then you just got to add on an extra amount of time with your brain learning to distinguish differences. I don't think that should put you off learning two similar languages in the long term. think that's a great idea. I really want to learn Spanish. So definitely do it. But I think you need a sufficient gap of time. So that's the first thing. I don't really see the same problems occurring if you study like Italian and Chinese, for example, because the languages are just so different. You're never going to jump into Italian while you're speaking Chinese, or you're never going to start writing Italian in fucking Chinese characters. And actually, so there's a clearer line. And then the second reason, maybe this is a more personal reason. It's a bit more personal, but I just think if you have a language that's more different, that you study in your spare time, it becomes more that appeal of having another language that's a bit different, like another way of thinking, another grammar, which is I think in part the thing that will excite you about a different language. Maybe there's more to say on where that's the reason you're interested in a different language. But if it's very different in terms of grammar and the culture associated with it, I think you're going to be more inclined to get more out of studying that language for a bit. It's going to feel more new and more interesting and more vibrant. Again, that's just my personal I'm really living up to that with Greek and Latin, because they have a lot of similarities, but there are the differences that they do have I enjoy, and I think, if I was studying Latin and I don't know, there are a lot of languages that are similar enough to Latin. Let's say I was studying Latin and Etruscan, or I don't know, another Italian language, or maybe even Latin and Italian. I might get slightly more bored by the lack of variety there is. So anyway, my advice is, if you're about making progress in the language, you should just stick to one language. If that's what you're really about, and the little bitch part of your brain will tell you to not do that, because it wants the variety that you lose in a language when you study it for any length of time enough to get good at it. But you got to say to yourself, that's the sacrifice you have to make progress in the language, and trust me, you won't regret it. Getting really good in one language, it's far better than knowing a little bit of other languages. I'm not saying that that's not good as well, but I just take it from me as someone who's spent a lot of time dipping into a bunch of other languages here and there. It's great, but it's not really. You don't start a language wanting to you don't want to just learn a little bit of it. The real rich satisfaction comes when you've got an absolute mastery of the language, enough to just switch it on and off and you're not thinking about it. And it's a very long road to get to that stage. But it's just so much more worth it. Yeah, people like Steve Kaufman will say, "Oh no, just study. It's great to learn a bit of Hmong or a bit of Slovenian or a bit of Greek." And I know where he's coming from, but that's coming from someone who's spent a very long time mastering singular languages before, and that's what has really made him really successful at learning languages, is his ability just to go, like when he was studying Chinese, study that language solid for like 6 months, absolutely solid. It wasn't, I think he was fucking about learning a bit of Hmong or a bit of Slovenian or a bit of Korean in the meantime. No, he wasn't. So it's worth remembering that. I think he's not, as people get older and they reach success in their fields, or just success in a more general term, they'll tell you stuff like try and balance things out. But really, I think proper worthy success only comes from really intense, not particularly enjoyable commitments and work. And that's definitely applicable to languages. And for me personally, I just think often I'll walk past a Italian coffee shop or I think, oh man, I wish I was learning Italian. Or I'll walk past a Afghanistani food shop, and I'll be speaking Farsi, and I'll think, oh, why am I not learning Farsi? What a cool language. Or I'll read in the news about, I want to learn Russian so bad, but I just have to say to myself, but what I do is I have to see my learning Latin as part of the process of learning these other languages that I want to learn. Because if I get Latin under my belt, then, learning a bit of Russian, I was like, easy, So that's another thing to bear in mind. View progress in one language as progress in all of them. Because to attain mastery in one language makes you, first of all, you're going to commit to learning another language when that time comes. And second of all, really sorry. And second of all, and you learn all the skills necessary to better study that other language. So, for example, of Russian, when I learn Russian, it'll be a fucking doddle because I know what case system's like, I've done it before, and I can just go at it with a clean slate, and it'll be much quicker for me. I'll be much more familiar with how these kind of languages work. So that's the kind of personal way I view it. Can't really put it into better words than that, but I hope you guys get what I'm saying. And then, so yeah, that's my advice on learning multiple languages at the same time. Do the hard work, especially when you don't have to.